Cannons roared across the gray Atlantic as HEMS Victory chased smoke through a wall of enemy sails ahead. Nelson stood beneath snapping flags while French and Spanish guns flashed like lightning before his advancing battle line. A shot smashed the sea beside Victory, throwing white spray over men who had not yet fired back. The enemy line stretched ahead, immense and waiting, like a floating fortress blocking Britain's road to survival itself. Nelson knew the chase was ending. Now his fleet had to break through fire or die trying there. Collingwood's Royal Sovereign surged southward, racing into the enemy rear before any British ship could save her there.
Enemy are in range, sir!
The first broadsides exploded, and the Atlantic vanished beneath smoke, splinters, screams, and falling rigging around every deck.
Victory crawled forward under punishment, silent at the bow, because her guns could not yet answer enemy fire. Men gripped ropes, guns, and prayers, while iron shot tore names forever from the muster books below decks. Ahead, the Franco-Spanish wall glittered with flags, but Nelson saw a wound waiting to open wide before him. His plan was not to trade fire, but to split the enemy fleet like a blade at speed. Every minute brought Victory closer, and every yard gave enemy gunners a clearer killing range through smoke ahead. Nelson walked the deck calmly, although every shattered plank seemed to pull death nearer. With each broadside fired, from masthead to gun deck, the fleet carried one message. England expected duty, courage, and sacrifice that day. Then Royal Sovereign smashed into Santa Anna's shadow, firing both broadsides as enemies closed around her from aft. Flames burst from her sides, and the enemy rear buckled under the shock of Collingwood's arrival in smoke. Victory pressed on, steering toward Bucentaur, as cannonballs scythed through Marines standing exposed above the open quarterdeck rails. The wheel was struck, helmsman fell, and fresh hands seized control before the flagship drifted out of line. Enemy fire raked Victory from stem to stern, yet her bows still aimed at the gap ahead fiercely. At last, Victory broke through, and her broadside tore Bucentaur open from the stern with devastating iron force. The French flagship shuddered as cannonballs ripped down her length, smashing guns, decks, and command within brutal seconds. The line was cut, and the sea became a maze of trapped ships and burning canvas everywhere around. British ships poured into the breach, hunting isolated enemies before they could reform their line amid cannon smoke. Guns fired so close that faces appeared inside the smoke before vanishing behind flame and torn rigging above, the ships nearly touching in a lethal fog of wood and iron. Masts crashed like trees in a storm, dragging sails, ropes, and wounded men downward onto splintered decks below. Nelson's attack had turned one enemy fleet into scattered duels, each fought at pistol range through choking smoke. The British advantage was no longer numbers, but training, discipline, and ruthless closeness inside the broken enemy line. Redoutable moved beside Victory, her decks packed with marksmen, boarders, and dangerous intent above the smoke and flame. The French crew fought fiercely, trying to turn Nelson's breakthrough into a British disaster within moments of victory. Muskets cracked from the rigging, and officers on Victory's quarterdeck became visible targets beneath the shattered upper masts.
Nelson walked with Hardy, exposed and unmistakable, while death watched from Redoutable's fighting tops through hanging battle smoke.
Then the musket ball struck, entering his shoulder and driving downward into his body with fatal force inside. Nelson fell to the deck, understanding immediately that Trafalgar had taken its price from him at last today.
I believe they have done it at last. My back is shot through. My lord, hold on!
Around him, the battle did not pause. Victory's guns continued hammering Redoutable at brutal range through black smoke. Hardy bent close as Nelson whispered that they had done for him at last beneath the raging battle.
Hardy, they have done for me at last.
My lord, no.
My duty is done.
Sailors carried him below, away from smoke, shattered timber, and the Victory still unfinished above their heads.
Steady now, lads!
In the cockpit, wounded men groaned as Nelson listened for news from the battle, still thundering overhead relentlessly. Above him, British ships tightened the trap, striking enemies already severed from mutual support inside drifting smoke banks. Redoutable's courage was extraordinary, but her hull was being crushed by converging British fire from several close ships. Boarders waited, guns thundered, and the French ship began losing the contest she had forced against Victory herself. Across the battlefield, flags dropped as shattered enemy ships struck their colors one by one in smoky surrender. Villeneuve's command collapsed, not in one explosion, but through broken signals and isolated defeats across the torn line. Nelson asked repeatedly whether the battle was won, because dying was easier than uncertainty for his beloved fleet.
Is the battle won? Tell me, is it won?
Messengers brought reports of surrendering ships, and each report carried him closer to peace, beneath Victory's wounded decks.
Thank God, I have done my duty.
The thunder above began changing from desperate struggle into the sound of certain victory for Britain's waiting shores. Nelson had broken the invasion threat at sea, but he would never return ashore to hear Britain cheer. Outside, the Atlantic held wreckage, drifting spars, torn flags, and men calling for help through smoke and foam. The price of command was written across every deck in blood, powder, and splinters before the evening fell. Yet the strategic result was unmistakable. Napoleon would not command the Channel after Trafalgar or threaten Britain directly. Britain's wooden walls had held, and the road across the sea was closed to Napoleon's waiting invasion army. Nelson's final victory became more than a battle. It became a national memory for generations of British people. He died beneath the deck, while the flag above him still flew through smoke over the shattered fleet. The fleet had won without him on deck, because his plan had already seized destiny at the decisive point. That is why Trafalgar feels both triumphant and wounded in British history, even after 2 long centuries passed. It was not a clean parade of glory, but a victory breathing through grief from its first hour. Every cannon shot seemed to say that survival sometimes demands the brightest life from those who lead first. Nelson did not merely defeat ships, he broke the confidence behind an invasion before it could reach Britain. He turned danger into movement, movement into collision, and collision into victory beneath the enemy's startled guns there. The battle rewarded courage, but it punished every mistake with iron and fire across the broken battle line. In the end, Trafalgar belonged to sailors whose names history rarely remembers, though their courage carried Britain forward. They loaded the guns, hauled the ropes, held formation, and endured the enemy's fire through terrifying, silent minutes. Their discipline gave Nelson's daring plan the strength to survive its most dangerous approach under deadly frontal fire. The flagship pressed forward while the crew held the line under punishment. Their sacrifice turned tactics into legend, and legend into the shape of national remembrance after the battle ended. When Victory's guns finally cooled, the sea still carried smoke, cries, and wreckage beneath the fading autumn light. But somewhere below, Nelson's last question had already been answered by surrendering flags across the ruined enemy fleet. Britain had won the day, though its greatest admiral would never see tomorrow after Trafalgar's smoke cleared away. The chase, the collision, the smoke and the sacrifice had become one story etched deep into Britain's memory.
Trafalgar proved that command is not only orders, but choosing the fatal moment when others would turn away.
Hold the line! Drive into them now!
Nelson's choice to press on defined victory.
Nelson chose that moment, drove straight into danger, and carried Britain through it with his final great victory. At Trafalgar, the sea was saved, the invasion was denied, and Nelson became immortal in Britain's enduring memory.